Daredevil episode 10, Nelson versus Murdock. Definitely a great episode where we got to see the relationship, beginning of the relationship between Matt and Foggy, how they first met a little bit of the time when they were in college about to graduate, and at the end of the episode, their initial concept idea of, hey, this is what we should do. We got to see them at their old firm when they were interning, actually in the broom closet, which I thought was funny as soon as they went in there. And it's just like, they got a crappy office, and then it's like, oh, now I understand. They just put some desks in with like all the old files and everything else because they were interns. But I thought it was a great episode. It was cool to see this. Obviously it was a parallel because it was their relationship and how it started and how it's kind of falling apart at this point, and it was just really well done. I personally thought it was really cool to see their introduction. We get to see Foggy when he first meets Matt, and he's no different than he is in the present tense. So it's like he just was always like this. Even when he first met him, he was just cracking jokes, talking about how Matt can help him, meet a bunch of hot girls and stuff, and they were just friends. It was just like boom, they're instantly friends. And it was fun to watch that and watch them kind of grow up through these little flashbacks and see them at their time at the old firm and how it was really Matt's decision to leave and, become attorneys themselves because he knew kind of how things operated. He knew that that one guy who was in that case was being screwed over. Although, I wonder if in any other sense he would feel the same way because obviously they don't know, and it's kind of like, well, how did this info get out if you only told your doctor and stuff like that? So from a normal person standpoint, I could see why they would be doing something like that. Although even with the legalities of it still seemed crappy because it's like you're going after for damages, going after this guy who in the meeting between this row of like a dozen lawyers, which is a big company thing. That's kind of how that works. You got like a dozen people sitting at this table across from you, and it's just you and your lawyer, and this was an older guy with like an oxygen tank and everything, and even with kind of the legal grounds that they had, it's still the way they did it still painted a really clear picture that the company just didn't seem right, and it just kind of it was added on when Matt was listening to the guy's heartbeat, and he could tell that he didn't actually expose the company, but it was really cool. And the present tense where they're talking, and I love the fact that the entire thing was inside the apartment. Like the whole episode, they were in the apartment until the very end when Foggy actually left. And I just thought that was really cool. Like he gets his answers, he talks to him, and he tries to understand, did you do this? When did this start? And that was also another thing we got was Matt's very first mission as the Man in the Mask, and I thought that was really cool too. I wasn't expecting that one. And I thought it was just going to be their flashbacks. But it was actually really cool. They tied in and how things really started, how he would even really suppress his abilities because he wanted to kind of honor his father. And so he would look the other way and try to do things, through the law. And eventually it just fell apart for him and it just didn't work. And when he finally, interacted with something where it was like the law just could not help because things were just done in a certain way, to where the guy got away with touching his daughter, he knew that's when he really had to step up, and it was just interesting. It was really cool, and Foggy made a really good point during that when he was like, after all that time, even though you learn to fight from your dad a little bit, and you train with the guy's stick, which I love that he was like, isn't that the an old blind man taught you the ancient ways of martial arts? He was like, isn't that the plot to kung fu? I thought that was a really funny line. But he does mention that, like, you had to have kept training in order to really go in and beat this guy up. Like, if you had an actual fight with this guy, you had to be training constantly. You had to keep your training up because you knew at some point you'd have to do this. And that does make sense, and it doesn't really take away from anything. It's just like, from Foggy's point of view, it's still like you had this idea the entire time. You just carried it with you. You just didn't do anything until it reached that point where you couldn't take it anymore. And going through it and Foggy having to kind of deal with his emotions of his best friend being who he believes was basically a terrorist. Like it seemed like he was still fairly unsure by the end of the episode whether or not Matt had actually done that. And even though it seemed like he did kind of believe him for the most part, he did mention to him like the stuff in the last episode where Matt did go to really kill Fisk. He says it like, even without you not being a murderer in the cases I thought you were, you did go to kill this guy. That is what you went to do. And he still feels betrayed by that trust that he had for his friend. My girlfriend, who was kind of walking in and out, she doesn't watch the show, but she thought he was being really over dramatic, and I thought that was kind of funny. But I thought it made sense. Like, she somehow, and it was funny, like some of the dialogue, especially, even at the end, they kind of pointed out some of the dialogue, kind of made it seem like they were almost in a relationship, which was kind of funny. And at the very end, when they're at the bar, Foggy says something, and then Matt's like, "You make it sound like we're about to get married or something." And I thought that was kind of funny that she had mentioned that before, because a lot of the dialogue was, like they were really best friends, and they became, best friends, who actually ended up working together. And he even followed Matt because he wanted to stay there. So obviously, it wasn't just like, you're a really good friend to me. It's like, really, they're the only friends each other has, seemingly, as far as the show has shown us. For Matt, that's 100% true. It's just Foggy and now Karen. But, for Foggy, it seems like it's just Matt and Karen. So it made perfect sense that he'd be really hurt by everything that happened. And he mentioned that he wouldn't have kept it a secret if he was the man in the mask and things like that. And he felt kind of betrayed. He kind of felt like an idiot, especially for Matt being able to know whenever someone's lying or telling the truth. He kind of felt like, he almost felt like he was just played the entire time they were friends. And even though it wasn't really that big of a deal, it's just like the fact that he could have known, or that it could have just been simpler as far as he was concerned. He felt a bit betrayed by like his best friend who met in college, and then instant friends, go to law school and intern together, and then quit together and start up a company together by themselves. So it made sense that he'd be hurt. And then, I don't know how things are gonna continue on in the next couple episodes. There are only 3 left, so I assume that things are gonna work out between them, at least maybe in like episode 12 or something like that. Maybe not in the very next episode, but like in 12 or in 13, they'll probably work things out, and he'll be able to kind of deal with things. Like Foggy will be okay with Matt doing what he does. He'll realize that certain things just have to be done. Like he just has to he just has to do certain things. But I thought that was a really great portion of the episode. It was obviously the main point of this episode. A big reveal. We didn't see Claire in this episode, but she did help Matt out. She did get called in, so they met kind of off screen, I guess you could say, between the episodes. But it was definitely fun, and they're still keeping Karen in the dark, and she definitely had her own stuff going to keep her busy and distracted from worrying about them all day. So that was definitely cool too, and her and Ben going out and finding Fisk's mother, which I thought was very interesting. Initially, I thought maybe she just found someone else. I thought the first thing I thought was that she actually had someone who lived there, when she was like, we could just ask someone what it's like living here. And I guess even before that, I actually thought she was just going to pay for it because of the money she was getting. She was saying like, well, she'd looked this place up and she knew it was really nice or something, and so she wanted him to take a look at it. And she was just going to tell him like, I'm going to cover everything as much as I can, at least for as long as I can. But yeah, it was definitely fun. I was surprised that they met Fisk's mother, and I don't know what info they're going to get out of that, or if they're going to, well, I know what info they got, but I don't know if they're going to be able to use that 100%, like, hey, we got this from your mother, because that's going to be dangerous. They obviously know who the heck they're dealing with, and it's still Ben, being Ben, but in this episode, he had reached the point where he was changing, and this was kind of Karen's move to, say like, hey, why don't you stay where you are and keep the case going rather than giving me all the info. And I, thinking about it, I don't know if that's going to be good or bad for him, because it's Wilson Fisk. This guy will like destroy you. He'll, bash your head off using a car door. Not 100% sure if, Ben's really going to be 100% safe. It's not exactly guaranteed. Although they do have certain, like we already saw it in the episode Condemned, when Wesley mentioned that it was Ben. It wasn't just some random reporter. He was like, it's Ben. And he was like, Fisk had to think about it like, okay, instead of getting rid of the media, bring in all the media. Like, he had to actually change his entire plan and do the exact opposite just because it was Ben. So he could be protected a little bit, but they could easily get information on him, and obviously hurt his wife, who we found out in this episode, basically has Alzheimer's. I believe that's what it is, where you have certain moments where you're kind of in and out, and so of course that was sort of a sad scene. And I thought initially she was just really, really sick. That's what I thought it was, because they mentioned, I believe the first time we met Ben and he went to the hospital and they said she was, up for like 3 hours or so. I figured she was just really, really sick. I didn't think it was that she actually had an illness that was both physical and mental. So it made it even worse, and he has to deal with this stuff with hospice and possibly changing his position and become an editor instead of a reporter, so that he could have more money and more benefits to really support his wife. And now that he has this story, now that he's gonna have the Wilson Fisk killed his father's story, like this thing that, and there are probably gonna be other people who might kind of come out of the woodworks. Like I thought, like I lived in the city, I knew who this guy was. We all thought he took off because he owed, I believe they called the guy Rigoletto. He owed this guy money. We all just assumed he left, and so there could be some people that kind of come into the fold. Like, I definitely knew this guy. He was definitely a violent person, and I'm not surprised that his son would have to kill him or anything like that. So I'm not sure where this info is going to go or how fast it's going to be put into the media, but it's a big role. It's a big part. It's definitely going to keep Ben where he is. And like I said, I still don't know if that's good or bad, because he's clearly, okay. Like if he dies, there's going to be a huge blowback on that, and they are going to take that risk. But they could easily take out his wife. They could hire someone to go in and kill his wife and hurt him that way, and then he would have to live with that, and so would Karen, and they would both have to deal with that aspect. But it was really nice. Like I said, I don't know how fast he's going to act on this information and try to put things out into the media, but he might have a bit of competition with some of the stuff that happened with Fisk's storyline in this episode, which was crazy at the end. I wasn't expecting that. I figured that I honestly just thought like he was having an episode of kind of contemplation. I really thought that was kind of his episode. It's like he talked to Madame Gao, and she mentions like you have to choose your own destiny or choose your own fate, or other people will choose for you. I didn't find that like this episode type of ominous. I thought, oh, that would be like season finale or episode before, like episode 12 or something like that. It'll be dangerous or whatever for him, because she's gonna take things up into her own hands. I didn't expect it to be like that was their conversation, and then basically that night she would like poison the entire party or something, which I assume was her idea. I don't think it was, I don't know if maybe she convinced Leland, maybe he did know. Like I wasn't 100% sure about that, because he did pick up the champagne, but you can always just be like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and then you don't do it, and it's like, whoa, that was really close, but you knew the whole time. So I don't know if they were working together, if it was Madame Gao on her own, but we didn't see the conversation that they had, and obviously they all had issues with what was happening with Fisk, and he killed off the Russians. Nobu got killed, although admittedly that was his own fault, because he said he had a guy and it ended up being him, so that was kind of his own thing. But they were still disappointed. There are a lot of issues going on, and Madame Gao mentioned, she went to his house. She said, like, if you don't kind of fix things, I'll start dealing with our other party members directly and kind of phase you out. And, who knows? Like, and they know that he changed because of Vanessa. And, of course, it was pure coincidence that she would end up drinking. But maybe it wasn't, because, if Leland is in it with Gao, then it was like, all right, well, let's pick these up and try to kill someone off. Maybe he was trying to kill off Fisk, and, that's just how it was. But he could have given it to both of them instead of, just taking one or something. But I'm not 100% sure how that's going to play out. It seemed like it was cyanide because they were foaming at the mouth, but I doubt it'll be that, because that's basically instant. Like, once you have cyanide, you're dead in like seconds. So I highly doubt it was cyanide, because it actually needed to take hold on people. Like, if it was actually in there, it would, it wouldn't take like, oh, it was a minute after you took your first sip or whatever, you would just drop dead. So they foam at the mouth and stuff, but I'm sure it'll be something they can get an antidote for. No matter what it is, they'll find a cure for it, and they'll save Vanessa at least. I mean, those other people are probably going to die, but Vanessa will end up being fine. And with Fisk obviously changing because he's met Vanessa and he's changed his ways and things like that, and especially now that he's met Vanessa, that was one big change, and then he went public, which was a huge change because he'd been in the shadows for so long. With these two things happening at the same time, it really throws off the operation. And then obviously you have Matt coming in as the man in the mask, destroying the Russians, beating up Nobu and having him dying. So he has these three huge things kind of just coming together all at one time, and that changes way too much for the rest of the members. Although it's really just Gao and Leland left because obviously the Russians got killed and Nobu ended up dying and they let him burn to death, even though they probably could have saved him. So I don't really know if it was Gao. I have to assume it was. It was definitely her. But the big question is whether or not Leland knew or not, whether or not he's involved, and they both decided to work together and kind of phase him out. But like you never really know. Like with Leland, he's the sarcastic guy who seems like, all right, like I kind of hate this, but you got a plan, I'll go with it, and that's it. But he could easily say the same thing to Gao, like he's screwing stuff up. We kind of have to phase him out so that we can do this all ourselves. So we'll definitely see how things play out. I'm sure Vanessa will be fine if she did actually die. I don't know if that's true to the comics or anything like that. I'm not really familiar at all with Daredevil, comic book wise, so I don't know if this is following a certain storyline or anything like that, to be completely honest. But if she does end up dying, that would definitely change Fisk, probably for the worse, because I think he would become a straight up villain, because his thing is that he doesn't want to be violent just to be violent. But if that happens, like he finally has this woman in his life that does make him happy and does make him nicer as a result of that, and changes him to where he doesn't just have these instant harsh reactions to things. If she's gone and she's actually killed and dies in his arms, it could flip him back even beyond to where he was before. Like he would be much, much angrier, and he would become the character that we really know he is, where he's just straight up a criminal and he just doesn't care anymore. So we may or may not get that because of this event, but I think this was a great episode, great flashbacks for Matt and Foggy, cool little side stories with Fisk, and meeting Fisk's mom because of Karen and Ben. So I think that this is definitely a great episode. I'm really excited for the next one, but of course I want to know what you guys thought about this one, so please comment below, let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts, and I want to know whether or not you guys think Gao and Leland were working together on this one, because I feel like it can't be anyone other than Madame Gao. If it was Leland by himself, that would be a huge twist. I would love to see that happen, because Leland's the character where it's like, he doesn't get involved in any of the violence or anything. He's trying to just be like, I just want money, and he doesn't want any physical issues whatsoever. But if it was just him, that would be a huge twist. I'd love to see him kind of be like, surprise, I'm actually deadlier than you thought. But I think it was Madame Gao, and now the question for me is, are they working together? I still don't really know, but like I said, we didn't see that conversation, so like I don't know. Like he seems like he wouldn't do that, but I don't know. It's just really up in the air. But I want to know what you guys think about it. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.